Meet PitchDB, the ultimate platform for speakers looking to make their mark on podcasts, conferences, and media outlets. PitchDB provides access to over 3 million platforms, ensuring you find the perfect avenue for your message. With AI integrations, your bios and pitches are tailored uniquely to each opportunity, giving you the edge you need. Join now at pitchdb.com.
Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I am so excited to welcome Ruhina Mehra on the show today. Ruhina, you do one-on-one coaching, and the things that you talk about on your socials and your website are things that so many of us are looking at right now, are looking for and striving to change. I feel like there's this big energetic shift that has happened, and I'm just really excited to dive into this with you.
Yeah, so excited to talk to you as well, Annika, and just see where we go with this.
Exactly. So you are a holistic coach, but you also have a background in traditional healthcare.
I do. And depending on how much you want to know about it. So, we can go way back. I come from an immigrant family. I don't know how much, you're familiar with it. The typical South Asian family comes in, tells you, hey, you should all be a doctor, etc. And I always had an inclination towards helping people. So that's the path I originally started down. And then after having spent some time in the healthcare system, I decided to actually switch gears and move towards more management, administration on the hospital health system side of things. So I got my master's degree. But yeah, I was there for quite a while and then started my coaching business a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And what inspired you? So first of all, I should backtrack. My mom came over from Southeast Asia. So ended up staying instead of going back to run her mom's business there. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting because Southeast Asian, I don't think that we necessarily have the same expectations or constructs that other like South Asians, or if you're from Japan or China or other countries, have on them.
Yeah.
So coming from a family that was very entrepreneurial and very also like social workers, entrepreneurs, and teachers, right? And that's funny because I'm like, that's kind of where I found myself. But that wasn't necessarily where I thought I would start, and it wasn't expected. So I think it's really interesting. I just want to acknowledge that. Even as coming from immigrant families, we all have different lived experiences within that. And I'm sure it's helped shape who you are and how you help people today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. I definitely know every ethnicity, culture comes with a different, different baggage, different pros, different cons. All lead in differently. And I didn't know that about Southeast Asian culture. Most of the folks that I know that have immigrated over to the U.S. have come from families that are very much focused on financial stability and status and whatever, that looks like at the time. That in this case, it might be, doctors, lawyers, engineers, that kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, so interesting to know that's different from your end.
So I want to talk about your pivot and your shift into holistic side of medicine and really thinking about the whole approach and, the inner work that we have to do, not just the external physical health things that we see.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one big thing that I noticed many years ago, actually, I didn't know if I could have articulated it when I was younger, but the system that we have now in the US, at least in the Western system, is designed more for emergency care, critical care. It's designed for people who have something like, that's happened to them and you can fix and go. There's very little, and things are changing from what I've seen. Things are changing, but there's not as much of an emphasis on preventative care, on people as human beings. Everything's so siloed. Doctors work on you like you might go to a dermatologist, you might go to a heart doctor, but people, and they do interact a little bit depending on the health system that you might. So I'm getting really technical with the health systems, but they do interact a little bit, but not so much from what I saw to like the point where you're being treated as a human being. And that was something I always thought was interesting. That, and then I also just learned over the years that I was very interested in mental health. I'm very much a people person. I love to help people. And from a very young age, it's again something I couldn't have articulated, but it's something I always gravitated to naturally. So 5 or so years ago, I decided to take a coaching course just to explore that aspect without having to, go down the full route of therapy. And then I started really enjoying it and wasn't quite ready to make the pivot a few years ago. But after taking several courses, I decided, why not dip my toe in? Let's see what we can do and how we can make a difference, even if it's for 1 or 2 people here or there.
Nice. And then what happened once you started dipping your toe further and further into that world?
Yeah. So I actually started doing like speaking events. So I started doing workshops for different communities. So in LA, LA, you and I both live here. There's a lot of wellness, quote unquote,
Right.
focused mediums. There's a lot of people that do a lot of great work here. So I started doing workshops there, and I would find that so many people would come and so many people would give me such great feedback. And I would also speak at events, like South Asian focused events. And I found that there's so much of a need for this, not just in the community that I'm familiar with, but in so many other communities. But the people I was speaking to really resonated with my journey and with the things I was saying, and was like, wow, like there's such a gap in our systems and the way things work. And, I'm hoping to at least, again, be one person on this path to helping people in whatever way, big or small, I can.
So what does it look like when somebody works with you?
Yeah, so I do different things. So I do, of course, I mentioned my workshops. I've done speaking events before. And then I also do one-on-one, coaching, which is where the real, to be honest, actually, I don't want to say the real impact happens here, but impact can happen in many different ways. Different people learn differently, but it's where the most individualized and like focused impact can happen. So I work with people to help. Again, there's so many different issues that people come to me with. It might be in their dating lives. It might be with their parents. They might be having issues. It might be at work. They're really struggling. All of these issues are, from what I see, they're the external issues that lead people to understand that there's something bigger going on inside. And they're typically unhappy with the way their lives are moving. They've realized that they're living for other people. They're not living for themselves. That's typically who I work with. And a lot of people have realized, through working with me, that they can start to live for themselves. And then we work through the how as well, of course.
So fascinating, because earlier today, I had a call with somebody who talked about working with people on their businesses. Right? And usually he said issues in business usually come from something internally that's going on and it's manifesting itself. And so you're talking about the communication and trust and all these other issues that are more interpersonal, but they all stem from the same place, that whatever we're dealing with or haven't dealt with inside, that manifests itself and creates this maybe havoc in our relationships with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are all products of our own lived experiences, and we only know what we know. And so we live our lives based on our perspectives. So we're putting, and it sounds like projecting, which it is, but it's not about projecting per se. It's about your perspective. Like, I know what I know, and that's how I'm going to live. And I can't necessarily know a different way unless I see other people living differently, or I'm, working with someone. Even I've had therapists and coaches that have helped guide me to different understandings. And there's an awareness that comes out of working with someone bigly.
Yeah. So when people come to you with different issues, then you figure out, like, do you have to do different exercises? Do you do like meditations? Do you do hypnosis? Or like, what techniques do you like to use to really get to the root of the issue? And then I imagine that you have a whole bunch of modalities that
Absolutely.
solve it.
Absolutely. So I usually actually start, so I recommend this to everyone to look at it, have everyone look at something called the Wheel of Life. And you can just see all the different aspects of your life that, for the most part, we all have. Like, there's like 10 or 11: work, family, friends, social life, and a few other spiritual life, maybe, if that's important to you. And then I go in and we rate, 1 to 10, where are you having the most issues in your life? And then we'll pick the top 3 and focus on those. And so I do my work with, it's a lot of deep questioning. So the one thing about coaching is there is a level of patience you have to have, because I don't want to be here to tell you the answers. Yes, if you're struggling and you're stuck, I will offer a suggestion, here or there. But my job is to probe and help you think, because real change only happens when you can feel that shift happen internally. If I tell you, like, Annika, you should go, and not saying anyone should do this, but like, you should go to the mountains tomorrow because it might clear your head. A, that may not be the thing for you. B, you may just not want to, and you may like feel a resistance against that.
Okay.
So I'll start asking you, how have you been feeling? Why have you been feeling this way? What do you think you need? Again, this is just a very basic example, but what do you think you need to help you get to a more clear head?
Right.
And then what does that look like for you? So again, this was a very basic example, but getting to what the person really needs and offering, again, like I said, suggestions when they need it. And then I also, of course, do meditations. I do, there's a variety of things, but meditation is really about visualizing and helping you walk through the mental states that you're going through. So I find that helps a lot of people. Just helping slow down, get really present in their bodies, and then take them where they need to go.
Yeah. You don't have to use names or identifying information, but I'd love to hear if you have a couple of people who you worked with and what their aha moments were, how it changed not just the one aspect of their life that they came to you for, but other areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one client, she was having an especially difficult time with her parents, and she was actually living with them. She was looking for jobs, struggling with work. She was just having a really bad time with the communication with them. And so we had to, once I started working with her, a few things happened. One was that she realized she had a deep need for therapy. We realized together she had a deep need for therapy. I always tell my clients, I'm not a therapist. I'm here to guide you as a coach. So the difference between a coach and therapist, people often ask me, is a therapist, will help you look back as well as forward to some degree. But as a coach, I'm very much of the forward mindset. So I focus on the future. And so if I think people need therapists, I will tell them that too. So that was one thing that came out of it. I started walking through different examples and ways she could communicate differently with her parents. That's something that she started doing, or she at least started thinking about, and very slowly started implementing, because it was a pretty triggering thing for her. And we worked together for several months. And at that time, she was job hunting. She was miserable. When I came back in to check around with her after we finished working together, while she was still integrating a lot of what we did, she'd found a new job. She'd moved out of her parents' home. She was dating someone. I was like, oh my goodness. The results, they don't happen immediately, but they can. And when they do, when one thing shifts, everything can.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So that was one of my biggest, and I guess, I don't say most impactful, because everything different. Impact is different to everyone, but biggest change that I saw in someone.
I know you said that you also had to deal with things that in your life that took you on this journey.
Absolutely.
Do you
mind
about any of those? Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up, from a very young age, I would say that I took on the expectations that were set in my culture, in my family, of that ideal, quote unquote, Indian girl, which was I had to do well at everything. And it wasn't a realization, again, that I necessarily actively had consciously. It was deep in my subconscious, and I was always aiming for perfection. I was always aiming for the next thing and how to be the best. But, being the best, it's very subjective, and I was so focused on the external, how do I do well at this and receive the external validation for this, school, life, work, all of it. And so that was very much my focus. And because of that, I didn't really know who I was.
Oh, gosh.
Or even if I knew who I was, I didn't necessarily value who I was. If I didn't meet certain expectations, I was always thinking to myself, oh, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. So the story that I lived with for a big part of my life was I'm not enough. And that is something I really that's the essence of what I'm trying to reach when I'm working with people. I want people to know that they're enough no matter what. It doesn't matter where you went to school, what you look like, who your family is, but none of those things that we teach in our society today, how you do at work, none of it. Who you are at your core when you were born, that is enough for you to be worthy just as a human being.
Yeah.
And so I would say that I went through that. And then until I think I met a coach of my own, and that journey started helping me move forward and realizing that I had all of these internalized feelings that had, in a way really dampened who I was and not allowed me to be my fullest self and not allowed me to live in my most authentic way possible, which is why I now call myself an authenticity coach.
Authenticity isn't just a buzzword. That's the thing, right? Because even in the marketing world, we talk about being authentic, transparent, honest, because if you are a brand, whether it's you as a marketer or you have a bigger company, that's what people want to see nowadays, at least the younger generations. I feel like in so many ways, they're so much more authentic to who they are and just trusting of who they are and being willing to accept who they are. Then
it's truth, right? People can see through something when it's not truth, whether it's a brand or company or a person, you can usually tell when there's a facade. You may not be able to tell exactly what is going on, but people can usually see through that. So yeah, that's a big part of what I'm trying to spread, is just to help people live in their own truth.
And it can be really hard to trust yourself and to not put everybody else's or what you think everybody else wants you to do, right? That can be, I think what you're helping people deal with is one of the hardest things that we have to unlearn, right? These constructs. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. It's quite sad to me that we aren't taught from a young age that trusting yourself is something that we aren't taught. Just like we're taught how to move from one thing to the next. We're taught about productivity. We're taught about outcomes. We're not taught about how to look inward and how to understand, okay, yes, I did something wrong. I did something right, regardless. Whether you did something really well and you're on a high, or you did something really badly and you're on a low, that neither of those actually defines who you are. It's that balance level, coming back to like homeostasis, almost coming back to the balance scales and realizing that neither of those things impact you as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking about like our internal or external, if you don't listen to yourself, then that can cause health issues and health outcomes. Going back to your other career.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, these like not listening to yourself, not living in your truth, can lead to things like severe anxiety, severe stress. You might not know why. You might constantly be pushing yourself to live for other people. You might be living under that stress, that burden, trying to get validation from other people. And that can cause issues. It's usually the pushing of it. And I mean, we've seen, there's at this point an epidemic of anxiety and depression and other mental health related issues that are ongoing. And that's, again, because we aren't able to live in the present. Most people are living in the future, in the past. Not to say that that's wrong, because it's, again, you're just, an outcome of the way you've lived, but that can be changed is what I'm getting at. I was and am someone that, gears towards a more anxious tendencies. And even I have to often, put the practices that I teach my clients into play. And the biggest one for me is really coming back into my body and really coming back into the present moment. It might sound simple to some people. Some people, it might sound really difficult. You might not know what that means. But for me, it's always meant just, feeling into myself, less thinking, more feeling is what I like to tell people, which is hard to do in our society. We've been so focused about planning and thinking and, again, moving ahead. I know I reiterated this so many times.
Yeah. Well, it's so true. And I think when we have a situation come up where then we're left with space, I think about if you get divorced, if you go through a bad breakup, if you are making a major life move in whatever respect, then when you have to sit in the silence, that can be the hardest thing, because you really have to examine, like, what do I want? Who am I?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the hardest part, because that's when the big emotions come up that we're trying to avoid. We aren't taught to live with our emotions, especially for a lot of folks out there that are maybe a little bit more sensitive than others, that maybe everyone has a range of emotions. Some people feel them a little more strongly. Some people have a higher tolerance for pain, emotional pain, physical pain. Some people have a lower tolerance for it. Those folks that have the lower tolerance, maybe they haven't learned how to feel their emotions. And so that's, again, something that I really try to help my clients understand and live with on a day-to-day basis.
Nice. And do you offer some tips on your website and on your social media for people who just are like trying to figure out how to even get to the place where they can just sit in silence and go within?
Yeah, absolutely. My social media, my Instagram, I use that to really help people, tips, tricks, just to do little mindset shifts. Yeah. Again, the big one for me has always been like coming back to the present. I know it sounds simple, but a lot of people really don't know how to do that. We talk about meditation so much these days, and people come to me sometimes and like, I know I'm supposed to meditate. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to do this. And so even starting there and, telling people that it's just about, again, either feeling into your body or looking at your thoughts. We talk about this a lot in the wellness world. So many people say like, it's about just acknowledging what's happening in your body. And once you're able to separate the voice, that inner critic voice, that's floating around, or maybe like the thoughts, whatever it is that's happening in your head, and really feel into your body, that's when you start to see the changes and the effects.
Yeah. Fantastic. If there was one thing you could tell yourself about going on this journey and becoming an entrepreneur, right? And putting yourself out there to be vulnerable and to coach people as the authenticity coach and guide, what would you say to your past self?
Yeah. As an entrepreneur, I would say be open to change. Because when I started my journey, I was very much focused on, I'm going to do one-on-one clients, and this is going to be the way I help people, because I love working with people one-on-one. It's actually my favorite thing to do. And it's how I get to see the most change. For me, it's the most satisfying thing. But then when I started organically getting opportunities for workshops and opportunities to do larger events, I had to push myself out of my comfort zone as well. And, I've now done talks where I've spoken to 40, 50 people in a room, whatnot, but it was something that I hadn't done before. And so I really had to, work through that. But again, it worked. It was it's such a beautiful experience for me. But I think as in life, we should always all be open to change and don't get attached to, one vision, because you may have a vision for yourself, and that could change if a new opportunity comes your way or something new comes your way that you just didn't expect. So just be open to it.
Yeah. Good advice. And I was going to ask what advice you'd give to somebody who's going on this journey and just starting to dive in. I think that advice you just gave yourself is really great advice for that person too. But if there's anything else you'd like to share, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. The thing I like to tell my clients is don't aim for perfection. Because a lot of people they start this journey with this thing, in mind. I have to fix myself so that I can get to XYZ goal. You're already fixed. You're a whole human being. You don't need to be perfect, but you can work on liking yourself more and trusting yourself more and loving who you are as a person. I think that for me is more of the ultimate goal, which a lot of people, again, when you're on this path of, constantly chasing the outcomes, we're taught to chase perfection. We're taught to chase the thing that looks the best. Yeah. But usually I try to help people get to a place where they feel more comfortable with who they are and they trust who they are.
Yeah. Nice. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra, some words that help you get through every day?
I would say it's not so much a quote or a mantra. It's more of, again, a reminder for myself that the present moment is all that matters. And I really push for that because, again, as someone who has, more anxious tendencies, I also tend to, if I'm not paying attention, if I've had a day where I haven't meditated or, done my own self-care, my own practices, then I can sometimes overthink things without realizing it and go, I need to plan XYZ so that my business moves like this or my day-to-day looks like this. And then I get caught up in that spiral even. So I have to remind myself, hey, come back. Where are you now? What can you do now? You break up the goals you have for yourself, whether they're in my personal life or professional life. Break up your goals and what can you do for yourself now that might make you feel better in the moment. And usually that also fixes things in the future. It's not like, that doesn't have an impact down the line. But a lot of people get so caught up, including myself, in like, what's going to happen next that, it's about just really, really coming back. And I do that by, again, feeling sometimes if I'm, having a moment, and they're a lot less than they used to be several years ago, I will just take a moment to breathe deeply, or I'll just start feeling my fingers and my toes and my feet and be like, I can feel, we don't really take the time to think about our body like that, but I'll think about it. It's sometimes I'll even like, there's my ankle. I can feel it. Have I really ever thought about my ankle before in that much detail? So doing that really brings you back into your body.
I've never thought about that too. Just thinking about your different body parts and saying hello to them.
Thinking it, more like feeling it. Because we're not to think about it so much, but feel it. What does it feel like to recognize different parts of your body?
Well, that is a huge takeaway for me, to not think, to feel, right? Because I keep wanting to go back to the thinking construct. And I love that advice. That's such a great way for you just to start being intentional, right? Being instead of doing.
Yeah. It just slows things down a little bit. If you're having a moment, again, most of us do, just bring you back to where you are and helps you take the next step you need to, whatever that might look like for you in any case.
This is all subject matter that I think all of us are needing at this moment. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what their transition is going to be. They're pivoting. There's angst about all of the different things going on in the world. So being present, being in the moment, feeling our bodies and our intentions is something we should all just take away this moment in time. Maybe everybody who's watching or listening, right when we end this, just take a moment for yourself to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing your journey and everything that you do to put good into the world and help people really trust themselves and get to the inner part of whatever's happening externally, whether it's physical manifestation or with their relationships. I love romantic, non-romantic, all this.
Yeah, highlight non-romantic because in society we put so much pressure on romantic relationships, but we forget, we don't prioritize, I think, in some ways for non-romantic relationships, or we don't think about how important they are in their lives. They're very important, and we don't maybe always put the same amount of effort into sustaining those relationships, but they're just as important for us as holistic humans for our mental wellness. So yeah, I hope, anything we've talked about today is helpful to at least, one or two people, because my goal is really ultimately to get people through any difficult, mental, emotional states they might be having and back into their bodies and back to who they are.
Yeah. Nice. And the easiest or best place for people to go to, Ruhina, would that be your website, your Instagram?
Yes, both are great. My website is ruhinamehra.com. You can send me a message if you're there. My Instagram is Ruhina Mehra Coaching. Send me a message there as well. I love to chat, to get to know people. So I'm always open to hear from others.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been, just for everybody who's listening or watching, we're nearing the end of the day here in Southern California, in LA. And this is a great way to end today and just to be inspired for what comes next. I really appreciate you bringing that energy.
Oh, I am so happy to do that. I know the LA energy is like that, where in any big city, it's up and down. And then there's so many people in the wellness world being like, let's all slow down together. But I hope to be one of the many. I know there's change happening all over the world. But yeah, like you said earlier, wherever your audience might be, if you're sitting in the car listening, or if you're at work, or if you're at home somewhere, even if it's for 30 seconds, maybe just take a few deep breaths, get recentered where you are, take in your surroundings, and get present.
Awesome. And with that, I have really appreciated having Ruhina Mehra on the show, and I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their journey, their story, and some tips for you to make your life a little bit better every day. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.